applied to be a speaker, it was a total shot in the dark. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest, my idea isn't even entirely my own. One day in class, in the middle of a conversation to help somebody else brainstorm ideas for a TED Talk, my friend said, "Hey, someone should do a TED Talk over imposter syndrome." Here I am. But who am I to pretend like I'm an expert on imposter syndrome? I'm not an accomplished speaker. I don't have any degrees in any psychology-related fields. I'm just a teenager who's struggling through high school, just like everybody else. I'm sure all of you sitting out there in the audience have felt like this at some point in your lives. Whether it's at school, at work, or even just in casual situations, we've all entertained that voice in our head that pinpoints our insecurities and weakens our own self-perceptions. In 1978, in a paper studying 150 high-achieving women, Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes coined the term imposter phenomenon. Today, it's more commonly known as imposter syndrome, which, according to Scientific American, is a pervasive feeling of self-doubt, insecurity, or fraudulence, despite often overwhelming evidence to the contrary. So while I've heard of imposter syndrome before, what I didn't know was that there's 5 types, as described by Dr. Valerie Young, who's a speaker, author, and expert on imposter syndrome. So far in my life, I've dealt with 3 of these types: the perfectionist, the natural genius, and the expert. So, as a cellist, there's this event I participate in every year called Region Orchestra. For those of you that don't know what Region is, during the fall, over the course of one weekend, students from various high schools across our district come together to frantically rehearse for like 12 hours and put together a cohesive performance. But the catch is, there's an audition process. In terms of cellists, the top 12 make the full orchestra, and the next 10 make the string orchestra. Ever since middle school, I've had the opportunity to play in the full orchestra. Well, except for last year. Being placed in the string orchestra was, quite honestly, soul-crushing. That result told me that despite all the time and heart I had poured into practicing, I just wasn't good enough to meet my own expectations from previous years. I began to doubt my technical prowess, my passion for music, and even my general ability to just perform under pressure. This year, despite initial qualms about my audition, I managed to reinstate myself back into the full orchestra. I thought I had done it. I did the thing that motivational speakers always talk about. I faced my failure head on, and I bounced back from it. That was success at its finest, right? But I still found myself questioning my abilities. I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't deserve the 3rd place rank I received. Even at the Region Clinic, when I was rehearsing and performing as part of the full orchestra, the doubt for my previous failure continued to eat away at me. That's the perfectionist. According to Dr. Young, the perfectionist focuses on the how and believes that one minor flaw in an otherwise stellar performance equals failure and thus shame. I believe that my one stint in the string orchestra somehow undermined my entire worth as a musician, which, looking back on it, obviously sounds ridiculous. So how do I overcome the perfectionist? I accepted failure. Cheesy, I know. But here's the thing. We're always taught to focus on success. Practice makes perfect. If at first you don't succeed, try again. We focus so much on the end goal that we often forget about the journey. Success isn't the antithesis of failure. I'd argue it's a direct result of failure. So that's the key to overcoming the perfectionist. Accept your failures, because that's what makes your success impossible in the first place. So it's not just in the world of music that I face imposter syndrome, though. Ever since I was 7 years old, I've been playing basketball. Basketball used to be like my little secret. It was something I practiced outside of school, away from the eyes of my classmates and friends. When middle school arrived, all of a sudden, I had this opportunity to bring my skills to the forefront as a member of the school basketball team. Whenever I stepped on the court, I felt in control because I had years of experience that some of my teammates didn't have because they just started playing. Over the course of the 2 years I played in middle school, we became a tight-knit team. The differences in our abilities didn't really matter that much because we learned how to play to each other's strengths. But then high school rolled around. All of a sudden, everyone also had years of experience, and everybody was a much better athlete than I was. I mean, being 5'1" isn't exactly an advantage when you're playing against people that are 3 years older and like a whole foot taller than you. So the sport I thought I was talented at suddenly became a lot more work. And I was used to being the most knowledgeable player on the court, but now I was far from it. And on top of that, nobody from my middle school team came to Clear Lake High School. Nobody. So not only was I thrust into a new, more demanding environment, but the foundation I had come to rely on had just suddenly vanished. And being alone was all the more amplified considering basketball's nature as a team sport. So instead of taking my newfound challenges in stride, I interpreted my inability to easily connect with my new team as a sign that I was an incompetent athlete. I fell victim to the natural genius, who, according to Dr. Young, focuses on the when and believes that ease and speed are a measure of competence. What I failed to realize was that transitioning into high school athletics was something that was inevitably going to be a difficult process. Assimilating into a new team is something that just takes time. And furthermore, I was never talented at basketball in the first place. Rather, it was the experience of familiarizing myself with the sport at an early age that produced the skills that I mistakenly perceived as talent. So how did I overcome the natural genius? I realized that struggling didn't mean that I was getting worse. It just meant I had an opportunity to get better. And having just wrapped up my senior season, I can attest that it takes a lot of patience and a lot of work to improve, but eventually I got there. So as an Asian, it probably doesn't come as a surprise that I participate in competition math. Now, I know what some of you are probably wondering. Why on earth would anybody participate in competition math? Well, one benefit is that I've had the opportunity to meet some of the most brilliant students in the state. So every June, there's this nationwide competition called the American Regions Mathematics League, or ARML for short. Every year, Texas sends the top 45 students in the state to ARML, who are selected based on a handful of scores from earlier math contests in the year. And 2 years ago, I managed to qualify for the ARML team. Now, granted, I only got the invitation the whole 2 weeks after my brother did, and I'm pretty sure I was only pulled up because somebody that was already on the team couldn't make it to the competition. But, I'll take what I can get. Let me tell you, the kids that are the top of the top in the state, I swear, they think I'm a completely different dimension than the rest of us. I mean, I'm over here having never written a legitimate proof in my entire life, and they're easily writing proofs about the differences and the orderings of binary partitions of integers. Yeah, that, by the way, was an actual question from the contest 2 years ago. I think it's pretty safe to say that I had no idea what I was doing. So last year, there was a rule change. Instead of 45 students, 46 were invited. And based on the results of the team selection test we were going to take in a couple of days, which we called TST for short, the unfortunate soul who scored the lowest on TST would become the team alternate. Now, the alternate wouldn't be able to participate in the ARML competition as a member of the Texas team. No. They would have to join a whole nother alternates team, which was composed of all the other alternates from all the other states. You can imagine I was pretty excited about the possibility of no longer being on the team. So the night before TST, I had the worst mental breakdown of my life. Like we're talking full on, I couldn't breathe, I was in tears, that type of mental breakdown. Based on how clueless I felt in the previous year, I was convinced that I was going to score the lowest on TST. And with the whole alternate situation, if I scored the lowest, not only would I no longer be on the team, but everybody that was on the team would know that I was the least intelligent one there. So where did all this overwhelming fear and anxiety come from? The expert. According to Dr. Young, the expert focuses on the what, and they're fixated on the expectation of knowing everything. I felt like a fraud alongside my teammates because I could hardly understand their thought processes. And the possibility of becoming the alternate, there was the possibility of my inadequacy being exposed. So how do you overcome the expert? I don't know. Because here's the thing, at ARML, I never overcame the expert. I just left it behind once TSC was over, which, by the way, I didn't end up being the alternate, so all my worrying was literally for nothing. But I know I'm supposed to give you some advice along the lines of, don't focus so much on what everybody else thinks about you. But that's something I still struggle with to this day, so to be honest, I don't have a clear-cut solution to overcoming the expert. And that's okay. I don't think imposter syndrome is something I'm ever going to completely overcome. It's always just going to be an ongoing process. But throughout the journey, I've learned more about myself. I've learned that perfection is an unrealistic goal. Struggling just means I have an opportunity to improve. And I shouldn't be so focused on what everybody else thinks. But most importantly, I've learned to trust myself. No matter the situation, I believe that in the end, things will, at the very least, turn out just okay. So what more could I want from life? Thank you.